Here's one of the secrets. Banks want to lend money.
Why do you guys have that flexibility? And you would think a bigger bank would be more flexible, but that's not the case.
You lend out money, the first basic rule is you want it back.
If you're fiscally conservative over time, you're going to be better off than not. Hey guys, today we're going to get inside the banker's mind. It happens to be our friend, Mr. Joe Kirkeeng, who happens to be a president of a bank. And we're going to talk to him kind of inside secrets. How does a bank work? What does it do? And more importantly, how does it help you build cash flow? Hey guys, welcome to the podcast. Today it is Inside the Banker's Mind. So we have Mr. Joe Kirkeeng here, somebody I've known for a very, very long time with the First Secure Bank and Trust, and he is their president. So Joe, welcome.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Definitely. So Joe, let's start with kind of the whole episode is supposed to be about inside the banker's mind. Like, what do real estate people, what can they learn from someone like you? So let's start with, how does exactly a bank work?
That's a great question. A bank starts like with any business, it has to have capital. Right. So the bank raises capital, and then one of the things that a bank does, based on the way that the charters are structured, is that we're given the ability to leverage that capital to maintain a certain capital ratio. So I don't want to overcomplicate it, but sometimes as much as 12 or 15 times. So we can lend $1 of capital 12 times.
12 times, right. So a very simple, and a lot of people nowadays understand that so you go out, raise about, let's just say hypothetically, 10 million, right? And against that 10 million, based on certain criteria, you're able to lend 120 million,
Correct.
110 million based on that.
That's
right?
exactly
So
the
you're
point.
basically able to lend in multiples. Is that what a lot of times when people when talk about the fractional reserve, is that kind of what people are referring to?
Yes, that part of the capital does have to be held back in reserve.
Sure.
Because there are times when you're making a loan, sometimes people don't repay the loan.
Sure.
Or they don't repay it in a timely manner, so that you have to have some in reserve to be able to maintain the ongoing concern of the institution.
Got it. So as far as a lot of times, right, people will look at a Chase Bank, right? People will look at Wells Fargo or BMO, Fifth Third in the Chicago market, kind of banks that have branches. For the general public, that's a bank.
That's their
That's
bank.
all that they know. But you guys exist in a little bit different space, right? I would like to say kind of the small credit unions, the banks and trusts you see downtown in a lot of places. You guys are in that space. So what is the difference between a Chase versus you guys versus a credit union?
Sure. Banks offer basically the same products and services. It's the scale to which they do them and who their target markets are.
Got it.
So a bank like Chase, Wells Fargo, Bank of
Sure.
America, some of the larger banks you mentioned in the Chicago market have the capital and have the bandwidth to go after much larger clients. And so based on economies of scale and other things, they're going to focus on certain segments of the market. The other little difference that exists between a large money center bank and a community bank, or I like to refer to as more as even a neighborhood bank, because there's another larger bank in our market, Wintrust,
Sure.
that calls themselves a community bank.
Community bank,
But they're tens of billions of dollars in size, and you're never going to have Ed Waymer or the president of Wintrust
Sure.
sitting here having this conversation. So we focus more on the neighborhoods, but whereas the money center banks are also driven by stock price.
Right.
You got to remember, they're going to have a quarterly call on earnings. There's going to be buy-side analysts. There's going to be sell-side analysts. And so they're going to move their business model around based on what those analysts are telling them is going to help maximize some of their stock price. Where a community bank that is going to still have shareholders because we have capital, but it might not be publicly traded or it's not actively traded. So there's a longer-term vision of truly getting into an overused word, but the relationship aspect of knowing your client and knowing their project.
Got it. So where does the credit union space exist?
Well, credit union is kind of, it's a tough thing for me to describe because it's a little bit of a thorn in our side, to be honest. Credit unions were originally set up that I worked with certain groups, SEG groups they were called, and because they were in theory filling niches that banks weren't doing, they had a certain tax preferential status that allowed them to be able to survive. Credit unions some of them have grown into size that they are some of the largest financial institutions in the state of Illinois. And so they still do the same basic process, whether it's credit union, bank, savings and loan is another form of a financial institution that takes in deposits and takes those deposits and lends those back out in the markets they serve.
Got it. So for the audience listening, right, the reason I asked that question was because what I want to kind of explain really quick, and this is what a lot of people don't understand, that is that if you go to Chase, right, you go to Wells Fargo, you go to different places, right, there are certain conveniences we all know, right? If you have a Chase branch here, you'll have it 100 branches everywhere. You go to Florida, there's going to be probably a Chase, even in a small town, right? That's the convenience of it. But yet the other side of it is that at the end of the day, right, you want to you have a trucking business, right, and you need to buy more trucks or you want to buy a small piece of land, right? A Chase doesn't, at the end of the day, you have $2, $3, $4, $10 million revenue, is not going to give you special treatment. Right, the guy, Jamie Dimon is not calling you and saying, "Hey, man, we want to underwrite your loan." Right? You're just, 10, 15, 20, 30, 50 million bucks. You're just a small fry somewhere that's really, they're not necessarily tailored to it. Can you go there? Sure, right? You can go there, but you're a number at that point. But you walk into a small community bank, you guys have 3, 4, 5, 8, 10 branches even. Now they can actually come in, sit down with you, explain what their business plan is. This is what I want to do, and have a one-on-one conversation and literally have that relationship going where as they grow as a business, be it real estate, be it trucking business, be it a small restaurant, they can actually sit down and have that conversation with you. Would that be correct?
That is very accurate. There are many different ways you describe, and we'll focus on lending for a moment within the financial institution space. And some of it's characterized by the 5 C's. You have collateral, credit, so on, cash flow, so on and so forth. But at the level you just described, character is a big part of it. That it's the idea that you as an operator can express what you're doing. You can demonstrate that, where sometimes the larger money center banks or even the larger regional banks turn it into an automated process.
Correct.
And it all comes down to an algorithm and a numerical number, and it all gets spit out, and that creates either a yes or no. And the visionary, the demonstrated operational skills, the intellectual capital, not just the financial capital that you bring to a project, gets lost in that process. Now, it doesn't mean that it's always going to outweigh necessarily the finances, but in the model we're talking about here at the neighborhood community level, it is a key component of know your customer.
And I want to give you guys a simple example, and actually it's example that I went through, right? 10, 12 years ago, the first time I met you, literally at the time I had called 25, 26 banks to just do a simple refi on a rental property. At the time, you didn't have a residential product where you could do a simple refi. Hey, I bought the property for $80,000, fixed it for 30, 40, the appraisal will come back at 200. Give me about 120 back. This is a very simple product. It cash flows. I have a lease, a stabilized asset. All the ducks are in a row. I don't want to over leverage. I want to be very conservative. And at the time, when I would go to Chase, they're like, "Oh yeah, bright idea. A lot of people have done this, and real estate market is crashing. And what do you think is going to make you successful?" I'm like, "Well, yeah, but this is a stabilized asset with 30%, 40% equity, and it cash flows, right?" And whenever they would say no, I'm thinking it's a personal rejection. It had nothing to do with me. They just didn't have a product for people like me at the time. And yet I walk into a bank like yours, you're like, "Man, number one, what you're saying makes sense. But if this is true, right? That if what you're saying you can pull off, we will underwrite these deals all day long, right? Why do you guys have that?" Or at that time, we're going back 2011. Right?
Yeah.
When the market was still recovering, 2011, 2012, right? Why do you guys have that flexibility? And you would think a bigger bank would be more flexible, but that's not the case.
Well, a bigger bank, again, think of a Walmart or something of that nature. It has to be systematized because they're dealing in volumes. They want it to be efficient, and that efficiency then correlates, especially on a smaller size deal, to a better return.
Sure.
And that return then gets brought up at the quarterly call, and the analysts say yay or nay, and then they move on. Where you know, sometimes you and I talk about, well, what are some of the secrets of banking?
Sure.
Here's one of the secrets. Banks want to lend money.
Right.
It's how we make money. It's how my kids get their teeth fixed. It's how, you know, I pay my cable bill. I still have cable.
Right.
Probably.
No, but I mean, a lot of times, and the reason we've joked about this, right? A lot of times you're like, oh my God, he's the president of the bank. It's like all knowing, all sensing, you know, Maharishi sitting somewhere. No, but I mean, that's the general perception. Right. What you don't understand, what people don't understand is there's, at the end of the day, right? You, as a president of a bank, you have a job, which is to make sure that you return profits to the shareholders, right? It may be a small bank, big bank. At the end of the day, the responsibility is the same, right? You're running a business, and it just happens to be the business of banking. And a lot of times, I think people forget that, because a lot of times it's the unknown, and they're like, oh yeah, bank doesn't want to give you a loan. No. They want to give loans to people who they think can pay it back.
Well,
right?
and even, and I'll take it just maybe a half step further, because that's absolutely the criteria. You lend out money, the first basic rule is you want it back.
Right.
Even if I gave you $5
Sure.
for lunch, you
Sure.
say, hey, let me borrow $5.
Right.
I probably wouldn't ask you for it back, but at some
Right.
point you'd say, hey, Joe, here's
Sure.
the $5 I gave you.
Sure.
So that way, if you ask me for it again, I'd give you $10 next time.
Correct.
And so on. But the other part of the space we're in is that sometimes people don't know what they don't know.
Right.
So what they're leaving out are key components of it. I'm going to go back to that 2011, 2010 meeting you and I had. What was the second thing we did? We went out and saw the property.
Right.
We went beyond the numbers that you had on a piece of paper or whatever an appraiser was going to tell us. You and I drove to Streamwood, Illinois,
Right.
and looked at the property. And because that's the engagement level, it took our relationship, it allowed it to get started, and then took it to a whole level that obviously, you know,
Right.
gave birth to a lot of what.
No, I mean,
happening
you
here.
guys at the time, and Kevin in Berwyn,
Right.
Those were the two kind of small banks, right, that we started doing 1 and 2 loans with, right? Literally at the time, I mean, no, even I couldn't have imagined that it would go to 200, 300, 400 kind of things today that we look at. But a lot of times people are very, very hesitant. And at the time, I had an idea, which I was like, and I think I've done my homework. I bought a decent property. I fixed it up. Now I just would like to have a little bit of money back so I can go do one more, right? It's not a very novel concept. It's been done hundreds of times, but yet, and I didn't know at the time that somebody would look at it and go, yeah, this is, as long as all the boxes check, which is property's fixed up, so it's a stabilized asset, right? To say it in the banker's term, it's a stabilized asset. Right. Well, number 2 is, what is the area? What are the economics? Like, do you want to lend money to somebody where the area is real bad and the economy is going to collapse in that area? Well, no, not in a tough economy. Right? This is simple, right? And then, is there a lease in place? How are you going to create cash flow, right? And all of those things were there, and you're like, okay, yeah, this all adds up. You go look at the property, you're like, man, this is a property I would buy. Right?
Absolutely.
And that's exactly what you want the banker to think. Oh my God, you know, I would have bought this property. And
I think I might have actually said that.
right,
to you.
exactly. Right. And it's that simple. Right. Now we fast forward that over time, we started running into things like, well, we want 5, 10, 15, 20 loans a year. And you said, hold on, Andrew, wait a minute. Right. Let's look at what you did this year. What is that? You're basically showing the performance. You said you're going to do something. Now you have done it. You show that on your taxes, right? Okay, everything checks out. Okay, no problem. Now we'll go to step 2. Now, and this is funny. A lot of times people don't get it. So a smaller bank like you guys generally will have a limit as to how much you will lend to a borrower. How does that exactly work? And what's the thought process behind that?
Well, banking is all about managing risk. And we could bore people for hours about talking all the different risks, but the one you're talking about is a concentration risk. That we have both a customer concentration, that we say, hang on, do we really want to quote unquote bet the bank on one client? Because even the most successful clients can sometimes hit a bump or go sideways, or we don't know what life's going to bring them. I mean, you know, we're all just visitors here on this planet. So there's that risk, and then there's also different types of loans. So a bank doesn't want to have all the capital that we talked about and the leverage capital that we talked about in a particular segment within the market. Like right now, for instance, the albatross would be Central Business District office space.
Right.
So we're talking downtown Chicago, not out in a suburb area, even though that did take a hit, but that CBD or that Central Business District office space really took a hard hit because of COVID, remote working, hybrid schedules. And so if you were over lending into that area, that's going to create a problem. Now, should you have some of that? Just like any diverse portfolio, you want to make sure that you don't have any concentration in one area. And then if you start to get a concentration in that area, just like you mentioned, you do a little bit of the real sophisticated term here, but the whoa factor.
Sure.
And you say, hang on, right now we've got what we've got. We want to watch it, make sure it works. The phrase we use is seasoning. We want to watch it, make a turn, see it show up on your tax returns and things like that so that we have a better understanding. Both of us have a better understanding of how this is supposed to operate and what the pluses are and maybe what some of the minuses may be.
So you talk about a couple different things, right? We talked about number one, market segments, right? So let's just, for the audience, right, think about it this way. You have $50 million that you're going to invest, right? Unless you're Warren Buffett, right? You probably not a good idea to go take all of that and buy something or go lend it to just one person.
Right.
It probably makes sense to diversify that. I mean, that's how a bank looks at it,
Sure.
right? So if you have, say, residential rental real estate, that would be one market segment. Then you have the office space. Then you have warehouse space. Then you have, say, a trucking business. You may have a pizza mom and pop restaurant. And then, so you guys as a committee, right, of the bank, you guys sit down and come up with a game plan. Then you present it to the feds. Is that correct? That, hey, this is going to be our business plan. So you can't just do whatever the hell you want to do. No. Correct?
Yeah, at the end of the day, I guess the simplest way I like to explain it to people is that we're a franchisee.
Sure.
The Federal Reserve, the FDIC are the franchisor. They're the ones that grant the charters. They're the ones that allow you to continue to maintain your charter. And we have to do exactly what you just described. That we have to show that we understand the risks of what we've done, and we then have to show not only where we've been and where we are, but where we think we're going.
Sure.
And we have to demonstrate that from a lot of different perspectives, including what you just talked about, whether it's collateral risk, we look at geographic risk, we look at a variety of different risks, and then we shock those. You know, that's the other factor that we do is what if real estate values fall by 20%? What
Sure.
does that do? What happens if interest rates double? Oh, they're never going to double. Really?
Right.
Because they kind of just did. And so how does that impact how you're doing business? And more importantly, how's it going to impact your clients?
Right. That makes perfect sense. So you're basically lending into that market segment, right? And a lot of times banks get in trouble when, I mean, think about this. You take Chicago, you take a lot of downtowns around the country, right? And you have a building, which is a historic building worth 100, 200, 300 million, right? You have taxes that go through the roof. You have tenants, big anchor tenants go away, right? You have kind of Corona type of situation, and the building goes dark, right? Suddenly, a building that was like iconic building. I mean, we've seen this happen, and now it's like you can't find a buyer for the love of God,
No.
right? No. And the bigger the building, the bigger in trouble it is in.
Absolutely.
Suddenly, something that for the last 80 years, 100 years, it's been like, oh my God, right? And today, nobody wants those buildings.
A real good example that most people can relate to, and not that it's in any trouble or
Sure.
anything, but we were just there, is Water Tower Place.
Water Tower, yeah.
Right down in Michigan Avenue, place we've got 3 kids that are grown now, but would go down every holiday season
Sure.
and visit that. And my wife and I were downtown, and we went to Water Tower Place. Every other place was
Vacant,
empty,
yeah.
and it was just a very different vibe. But 25 years ago,
Oh
you
my
said
God.
Water Tower Place, it was
Yeah.
the place to be.
No, even 10 years ago.
And so
right?
it shows some of that transition that you talk about, and that's what you have to just keep your eye on. I know I probably spend way too much time watching some of your podcasts and some of your other things, but you're very good at pointing that out geographically when you talk about your A, B, C, or how you risk rate your markets.
Right.
Because in some of them transitioning from C to Bs, but also some of them are in a B and maybe there's something else happening. Nothing inherent It's just part of the process.
Right.
It could be taxes, it could be political, it could be just pure geography.
Got it. So whenever you guys are, what is exactly a charter bank?
Well, a charter bank is a bank that has a charter that has been granted by the Federal Reserve. So the Federal Reserve is the overriding body for the financial institutions. And so a federally chartered bank means that you have the ability to function, access the Federal Reserve, and then you have to abide by all their
Guidelines and rules.
Right, yeah.
Right. Okay. So whenever a lot of times, right? Let's just say take Oak Park Bank, right? I walk into Oak Park Bank. I have a rental property, right, in Austin, or maybe so you're kind of east of Oak Park just a little bit, or you're south in Berwyn, or you're in Oak Park, right? They are very happy as long as you meet their criteria to do a loan. But suddenly, I take them a property out in Southside, or I take them a property in Crystal Lake. They him and ha. They're not going to say no to you, but they suddenly start him and hawing. Sure. So what is, like, this is something a lot of people don't understand, which is the footprint lending area for a bank like you guys. Sure. Chase is different, right? But you guys, the small bank space exists a lot in the footprint, and to do a lot of loans in the footprint, you guys like that. Explain that.
Well, it's actually a requirement. It's part of the social responsibility of having that franchise or being that chartered bank. It's called the Community Reinvestment Act. And the part that you're really referring to there is the ability to lend within your designated community reinvestment or CRA area. Now, a bank has some latitude as to what they can do, but it's primarily driven around the fact that if you're taking deposits from a certain market, then you have to show the ability and the willingness to lend into that market, so that we just don't take all the deposits out of pick a town, Joliet, and then lend it all up in Winnetka.
Right.
Because then what we're not doing is we're not serving the people
Reinvesting
of Joliet.
in the community.
Right. That's why it's called the Community Reinvestment Act.
Sure.
And so banks can draw that. Like, for instance, I'll just speak specifically of our bank. We have 18 locations. They go from the Wisconsin border up in Hebron and Harvard, up in McHenry County, and kind of swoop around Chicago all the way over to Oak Forest. But we also consider Chicago proper part of our lending area, because Reach can help with electronic and other things that we can do, so that when we come in and we're examined under this Community Reinvestment Act, one of the things they're looking for is called the in-out ratio. And to your point with Oak Park Bank or whatever that bank may be, that you have to show that you've got more loans in your designated area than you have outside. Yeah. And if you don't, then maybe you get a demerit, and you're going to have to modify how you do your practices.
Got it. And here's the cool part, right? What we were talking about a little bit earlier was that when you're working with a small bank, like just for me early on, a lot of times I would have these ideas, hey man, can I do this, right? I would run it through my filter, which is that, does it make, is there equity, is there cash flow, does the DCR make sense, is it a good area, is it stabilized, all those things. And then I would pick up the phone and call you. A lot of times we've just talked, we've become friends, that, hey man, this is what I'm thinking. What do you think? Right. Is this a pill the bank would swallow, right? So you're like, well, you're saying it this way, but we would look at it this way. Right. It's the same exact thing. And a lot of times, especially for small business owners, right, one of the great partners, and a lot of times people don't even realize that they want your business. At the end of the day, you're Mr. Entrepreneur that starts out with a few pennies and an idea. Some point you have 100,000, 200,000, a million, 2 and 10. They actually want those type of people that over a period of time have needs, lending needs, borrowing needs, and as they grow, the bank, I mean, those are great customers for the banks.
Absolutely.
Right?
Well, take it a step further. And you, Rahul, there's many of you, can give dozens of examples that you start out with one or two, and now you've grown into other. But the other side of that is birds of a feather flock together.
Right.
So you have other friends or other colleagues that are doing the same thing, and then you say, well, why don't you talk to Joe or why don't you talk to Kevin or whomever it is that you're referring them to? And so it becomes an outstanding business model, and it's not just whether it's in the investor-owned residential real estate, but it can work in all different areas and it's because you take the time to listen. Right. And it does take time. Right. I understand that, and time obviously is the most limited of resources, but if allocated correctly, you can get the right return out of time investment as well.
Right. And a lot of times, you have a idea. Just the other day, there was somebody from Mastery who wants to take a strip club, and change it into some multi-unit housing. They had some ideas. Now, they're a operator that is experienced operator, whatever ideas they have. But at the end of the day, I'm like, listen, you're the right person. We can come up with our business plan. You can make it happen. But you have to think about how is a bank going to underwrite this? Meaning, how are they going to refinance you out after you've done this? What is the amount of time period you need? So let's get on the phone, talk to you. Just happens to be, that area. You guys have done a lot of lending in that area. And Joe goes, hey, man, we're going to look at this. If you're paying this, right, you're being a bit over optimistic, right? And it's almost like if you understand how to work with some of the small banks, they're almost a part of your mastermind without paying for it.
Well, exactly. I mean, think about as well, you talked about Community Reinvestment Act and this thing, but we also know that market.
Right.
This isn't somebody sitting in Columbus, Ohio, or Charlotte, North Carolina, or Wall Street in New York. How many times have we had conversations where a property pops up, especially in certain areas that I know really well,
Sure.
and you're like, tell me about this, and I'm
Right.
like, with 30 seconds, yes or no.
Right.
And you're like, wow, okay. And then I
Vice versa.
reciprocate. I do the same thing to you.
Yeah.
I'm like, we're having trouble with this property.
Right.
Is this something that I can, yes or no? And
Right.
if you tell me one way, I might approach it
Sure.
one way to handle it. If you tell me no, then I might approach it another way to handle it. But it is a little bit of that market knowledge that I call it, again, a little nichey, but we call it a little bit of the Pocahontas effect. That one property you specifically brought
Sure.
up. Part of my concern there was like, you think when this is done, you're going to have X amount of dollars into it. And from a cash flow perspective, based on a cap rate, it should have this value. And I told them, I said, there's no way that it's ever going to have that value.
Because the part of town, because of the, because of other economic factors,
right.
If that property was somewhere else, it would have a tremendous amount of value, right? And so you have to kind of think about all of those kind of things. And a lot of times, the reason we call it inside a banker's mind, a lot of times people don't think, like, hey, man, I'm buying my little rental property, right? But if within your community, you have a lot of small banks, and there's a lot of Joes out there. There's another one called Kevin. There's a bunch of them that would want, as long as you have good numbers and you know what you're doing, they want to engage with you, right? Because at the end of the day, you become a great customer for that bank. And it starts out with one little loan and goes 2, 3, 4, 5, and it kind of explodes. So whenever you guys are lending for a product like We Borrow, somebody's buying a small warehouse, they're building a self-storage facility, all those kind of things. You're basically lending into a LLC or a S corp. You're not lending on personal name.
Well, it's a combination,
Okay.
to be honest. Because in many of the LLCs or even S corps, but we'll focus on the LLCs for a moment, they're either sole member or just a couple members.
Sure.
So it's really more of a mechanism to manage risk.
Right.
And the risk might be insurance risks or
Sure.
other litigious risks that come along with it for tax reasons. So you're
Right.
trying to manage your tax risk. So you have to take into consideration the individual, because in that person's mind, it's all combined.
Right.
They lump it all together. They're going to
Sure.
take money out of the LLC to take their family to Disney
Sure.
World. They're not going to say, oh, no, only the money in the LLC can be used for
Sure.
the LLC.
Right.
So it is a combination, but we do look at, we have to look at each entity, but then we have to look at them as an aggregate or global.
Right. Okay. So how does it work? Because the thing I like about you guys is that back in 2011, 12, when nobody was willing, there was no the big Wall Street firms today, right, that are basically in the hard money business. There was nobody there.
Right.
I mean, that was a tough space to be in at the time, yet you guys were willing to underwrite loans on rental properties, right? What happens with Wall Street? Why was there nobody in Wall Street that was willing to do it until almost 2015 and 16, and suddenly everybody came in?
Sure. Well, I mean, your bank should be your most conservative lender.
Right.
So it is belt and suspenders, and I'll be the first to admit that dozens of times people say, well, I didn't have to provide that to,
One of the
somebody, whatever
hard
it is.
money lenders,
Right. And I'm like, yeah, but that's a different space. So that's why, the banks build the house 2 feet higher so that when the flood comes in, yes, stuff gets destroyed, but it survives it. You're almost referring to a little bit of the whole, the premise around the movie The Big Short,
100%.
where things become almost synthetic.
Right.
That it's taken into a situation where it becomes so voluminous that nobody really knows what's there, but they believe in the law of large numbers.
Right.
So then that's what's going to work. And just like anything else, we saw it happen even when COVID hit.
Right.
It doesn't necessarily have to be a true financial crisis. That was just more of a pandemic type
Sure.
scenario, and everything shut down in a moment.
Right.
Because uncertainty will take, when there's uncertainty and there's a great deal of risk, you immediately step back.
Right.
Is that going to blow up? I don't know. Step back.
Right.
If there's no risk of it blowing up, then why would you step back?
Right.
And so that's why a bank is a good resource as part of where you're growing your business or you're growing your portfolio, to be that steady. It shouldn't be overly stylish. It shouldn't be overly crazy, but doing it. But I'll go back to what we were talking about earlier at that community or neighborhood level. It's okay to know what you don't know. Yeah. And I'll be the first to admit that we were having a conversation just prior to this, and you were teaching me, and hopefully I was teaching you a little bit about how your chocolate, my peanut butter, we put them together, and we have something special.
Sure.
And so that's what I think people just have to allow themselves to be, is a little bit vulnerable. Yes, are we the evil, Mr. Potter or whatever, walking around? I guess. I mean, I tell all our employees, it's a fascinating discussion. I ask them all, what's your primary reason for being here? And they'll say, to provide good customer service, to be there, blah, blah, blah. And I look at me in the eye and say, your number one reason for being here is to maximize shareholder value.
Right.
And immediately they stop.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh my gosh, I didn't think you were that kind of person. What are we doing here? But what I catch them on is, what does value mean?
Yeah.
And in America, we want to monetize value.
Sure.
Because if it's valuable because it costs a lot.
Right.
But there's a lot of other things that are valuable. Reputation, building relationships. Yes, we want to monetize that at some point, because that's part of the exit strategy or the strategy, the business model strategy. But it doesn't necessarily have to be the first thing.
Right.
And that's the thing I enjoy, if I can make it a little bit proprietary, working with people that you've worked with in the past, is because you take a teacher's approach. Yeah. And so then when I get the opportunity to work with them, I can tell that there's this desire to learn, and I learn as well. Yeah. So it becomes symbiotic in that.
No, and we have a very conservative approach, right?
Yeah,
in terms
absolutely.
of fiscally, and I'm going to talk about politically, we're talking about from a fiscal perspective. I believe that if you're fiscally conservative over time, you're going to be better off than not. Because on the other side, 1 in a million may become the bajillionaires, but rest of the times they're going to lose. Right. Because you can't be reckless. You have to be, the more conservative you are, over time, you'll end up much more financially savvy and in much more financially better position. And so those are the types of people we send to you guys, right? Because this is a relationship. I would never want to send somebody, even from Mastery, that's reckless, because guess what? If the loans for you guys get burned, right? Not only is it bad from our relationship standpoint, it's like, hey man, Andrew's okay, but the guys he sends, why would you want to do that, right? You don't want to refer somebody you do something business with for them it not to work out, because tomorrow the bank is going to go, you get a bunch of those kind of people, the bank goes under, right? That's how an institution goes under.
Or they see risk.
They see risk, and they're like, hey, we don't want to lend in that particular segment of the, because it's analyzing risk at the end of the day.
And sometimes risk can be the source.
Right.
Where does the source of business come from?
Sure.
Oh, well, that's not, that there's problems.
Right.
So therefore we see risk. And just as I said, when you see risk, you step back.
Right. So a lot of times, right, I mean, like for this building, literally the office building, whenever I was like, man, we're thinking about buying this, right? Do I really want to, at a time, middle of Corona, right? We're like, we want to buy a 50,000 square foot office building, right? And because we're spending a lot of money a year for hotels, for rooms, for blah, blah. We're spending, close to $100,000. Might as well, our mortgage would be less for a large building, right? And you guys were willing to look at that, right? Same thing when I was like, well, I want to buy a bigger airplane. That's not something you guys generally do lending in. No. The office building, yes. Yeah. But something like an airplane, that's an out-of-the-box thing for you guys. You guys are not in the aircraft finance business. Why would you look at something like that?
Well, the office building, for instance, was because again, we knew you, and you were able to share your model.
Right.
We understood that your model went beyond creating a portfolio of real estate to create cash flow. You had a tutorial part of it.
Sure.
You had an association. You were an aggregator of people. I've shared with you this story before. The first time I walked through this building with you, I was looking like, okay, it's a great building, wonderful location. Couldn't quite see the vision.
Right.
And now I look at this and I'm like, wow.
Right.
Because you are a good operator. Now going back to the plane, same type of thing. Yes, I know you use it sometimes for recreation, but you also you had a business purpose
Sure.
for wanting to acquire it, because same reason. You travel a lot.
Sure.
You were looking at other markets. At one point you were looking down, I think, in Houston, another time in Florida, and
right.
some other places. And so rather than you get on a commercial airline, you're like, let's do this. And you showed, the professional fortitude that at least gave us the willingness to say, yes, let's take a look at this.
Right.
And obviously it's worked out for you, it's worked out for us, but that's when I go back to what I said before. Banks, at the end of the day, we want to lend money.
Right.
For us to maintain our business model, we should be lending money.
Right. And sometimes they're going to say things like, with the airplane specifically, right? At the end of the day, when the committee meets, they're like, well, we're willing to give a loan, but instead of doing a 10-year note, we want to do a 7-year note. Right. And we want X amount of money down. Right. At the time, I'm like, well, but I was like, that's fine. Right. I'll just pay it off in 5-6 years. Right. And that's what I've done. Like sometimes I'll just send a check for an extra $100,000 just to pay it off. And when you think about a lending relationship from a bank, right, you go back for another loan for something else. They're like, oh my God, the guy's paid well ahead of time. He's doing all the right things. And that's where you build a relationship. And that's what it really boils down to.
Sure.
Right. Same example with the building. I wanted to buy the building. I was willing to put down 25%. Right. And you're like, hey, man, you don't have to. Right. You'll probably qualify on an SBA loan. So we'll go ahead and underwrite you. We'll give you the loan. But I think in the time frame you have, we can probably get you qualified for a SBA loan. Right. And that's what happened, right? That you guys got that. So instead of now coming out of pocket 25% to buy the building, and I was going to do all the construction for cash, right? I was able to do it for a lot less down payment.
Right. And it left you capital to do the improvements you were
Sure.
looking for and to maximize the opportunity. And there's a good example of somebody trying to give you choice.
Right.
I remember that discussion and really laying out the payments, and and you were kind of, because the way you are, you're like, well, I really don't want the debt, so let me do this and we'll just pay it off. I'm like, yeah, but if you had this extra 15%,
right,
you shared with what you were trying to do here, that money's going to have to come from somewhere. Why not use leverage,
right,
prudently,
sure,
and allow you to maximize that opportunity.
And that's what goes back to a lot of times whenever I have these ideas, right? I'm like, hey, let me call Joe, run it by him. And what it does is it helps you clarify the thought process, right? Or helps you think through it in much more depth and helps you figure out how a lender would look at it. In the end, we're going to go back to them. So early on, we were talking about this, and we have laughed about this, right? From time to time, we've bought properties, and we're like, okay, we want another loan, another loan, another loan. And at some point, you're like, man, for one person, we're kind of at our max, right? Which we talked about a little bit earlier. But then once you guys get to that, you're like, well, I got a sister bank that'll do a loan for you. How does that work? Because a lot of times people don't understand that.
Yeah, we have a little bit of a unique situation where there's not many organizations set up the way you are. It's a 3-bank holding company.
Got it.
So it's First Secure Bank Group, then we have First Secure State Bank, First Secure Community Bank, and First Secure Bank and Trust. I have a little bit of a unique role that kind of permeates all the different entities, but each bank is looked at individually. So then when we reach a capacity or a concentration in one bank, then we can say, okay, here's the sister bank, which is really the same or under the same holding company, but a different bank. And we'll even take that a step further. There have been times before we had the sister banks that we said, but I know a bank, and have introduced you to or others to other bankers, and then you've done or somebody's done several loans with them, because that's something I was going to bring up earlier. the relationship, the rapport, the character. Remember, I brought up character earlier. That's where I think community banks and money center banks kind of differentiate. Is character means a lot to a community bank, where my network is your network,
Right.
and many times your network has become my network.
Right.
So you'll ask me a question, and I'll be the first one to admit I don't know the answer, but I know somebody who does. Right. So let me make a couple phone calls, send a text or whatever, and then I say, well, here's where this would head.
Sure.
And so is it free advice? Yeah, it might be worth just that. It's free, so it might not be worth anything, but it at least gives you other options to consider, or whomever you're advocating for on that particular situation. And that's where the in-person, the community aspect of it goes from incremental to exponential.
Right. And I think that's crucial, because a lot of times if Joe is referring us to somebody, right, he's referring to us to somebody who's kind of at a VP position, at a bank where they're going to take that call seriously, because it's like, oh, this is Joe's good customer, right, and they want that same profile of a customer, right? They're like, okay, yeah, Joe's done a lot of, for a bank, when somebody else has underwritten them and now they get to underwrite them, they love that.
Yes.
They absolutely, a banker loves that, because they're like, well, they've done a bunch of loans, known the guy for a long time, they're good as gold. Guess what? Yeah. You already are up here. And that helps a lot of times. And that is worth its weight in gold,
Yeah.
right?
I agree. The same, whether it's coming or going, that transfer testimonial is huge. Somebody says, this is a great client of mine. Unfortunately, we're not able to do this particular transaction for a variety of reasons. I'm taking that call. I'm talking to that person. Not that I wouldn't give that same attention to somebody walking in off the street, but it's just almost like being like you have a sponsor coming in.
Yeah, and you're being handed a great lead. Is really what it is.
And,
right?
and not that there's really a lot of this, but then you can talk banker to banker.
Sure.
So that the questions I need asked and answered,
right,
I can get from somebody within my industry,
right,
rather than trying to get
it from a customer
or translate from somebody else. Right.
So let's kind of come back home, where in terms of the Chicago market, right, we have a unique market compared to a lot of other places, right? Certainly, this is no Florida. It's not Dallas or Austin or whatever. What do you see in the Chicago market? Because the landlord laws are not the most friendly. No. It's a fact, right? We're in a judicial state, so it takes a long time to foreclose on a property, right? And the taxes are rather high in certain suburbs specifically. But what's your opinion of the market?
Well, I think the market right now is a little bit of a transition. Right. Just as we talked about, we haven't really gotten ourselves back completely around after the pandemic. Right. Many people, it's a wonderful thing about the human mind that we have this great little edit button, and we can determine, that seems like it was 20 years ago, or it seems like it was yesterday, depending on your experience. But the markets in society march to the tune. So having said that, I think there's some transition going on there, but we are anchored by one of the greatest cities on the planet, Chicago. Right. I mean, in as much as we watch the news daily, and I've got friends all over the country, I'm sure you do, they think when they got off the plane they need to start walking serpentine, and I'm like, no, it's not great at certain parts, but it's not that bad. I just mentioned to you, my wife and I were downtown, walking downtown, made it back home to the suburbs.
Right. No, it's again, what happens is we all have certain prejudices about things. That's called a human nature, right?
Exactly.
And yet when you look at because a lot of times, right, this comes up, they're like, man, Andrew, Indiana. I'm like, listen, man, Indiana's existed for the last 200 years, as far as I know, right? Not that there's great things going on. Right. It's much more friendly state, especially landlords. Economics are going great. But I'm like, listen, in my lifetime, Chicago's pretty good, right? And there's a reason why everybody from Indiana comes to Chicago to work. Right? I don't know of that many people that are going to Indiana to work, right? At the end of the day, it's still the economic hub. Right. That's just how it is. And what I always feel is because the mountain is very steep in Chicago, right? It's very profitable, right? I mean, there's no other city in the country of this size where you can still buy properties with 30, 40% equities, make $400, $500, $600 cash flow. And if you know what you're doing, you can do that in A and B suburbs, right?
And you have people from throughout the country trying to come here and do that. That's one
Yeah.
of the challenges we have is we get known within a certain market.
Right.
And then all of a sudden I get a call from somebody from New York, from California, from Texas, wanting to buy 3 or 4 homes or buy a multi-unit building. And all I know is 100% for sure, they've never seen the
They've
building.
never seen the building yet.
I mean, they've seen it online,
Right.
and they've seen the
Picture,
brochure, but
yeah.
they've not gotten out of the car and
Right.
walked in that area and seen the building. But the thing about the Chicago market that makes it so great is that it is full of opportunity and it rewards knowledge.
It rewards 100%. Well, I mean, it's funny. Like we talk about south suburbs, right? You could literally be in Alsip, and you're like, no problem, bread and butter client, right? And you suddenly are in Harvey, right? Economics of the two places are very, very different. You could be in Posen and you could be Midlothian, right next to each other, right? But they're not the same. I mean, nothing is
different
the same.
models.
Different models, right? And and that's kind of the beauty of it, right? That if you're that guy who's a sniper, right, sitting on the road, you can literally pick off properties where you can make returns like no tomorrow.
Well, and sometimes some of the areas that you were just mentioning, get painted with a brush that fits or doesn't fit. So there's
Right.
always opportunity within each market, but knowing and what I watch happen is some people will leave a market and they missed it because they think the whole area got painted with a broad brush, and I'm like, no,
That's not how it works.
In the Chicago market, like I said, rewards knowledge, rewards expertise.
And that's the biggest difference between, say, if you take the Chicago markets or some of the markets in the Carolinas, in Georgia, in Florida, in Texas. Like Texas and some of these markets have a lot of uniformity, meaning you go Austin, there's certain generalities that you can make and get away with it. I mean, that's why all the hedge funds go to the Arizona, the Nevadas, all these places where there's uniformity, and so they have a business plan. We're going to spend $100 million in this market. They came to Chicago, got creamed,
Right.
because one suburb right next to another, right? Every suburb has a different requirement, has a different the way it works, the inspection methods.
Yep.
And so if you're actually a small investor, small meaning anybody from wanting to do one property to 200, 300, 400, 500 properties that is managed locally, right? That understands the nuances, you can make money hand over fist, right?
You've pointed that out multiple times
Right.
when we bring up towns or certain properties. Yes, but and then it's going to be a really I dot T cross scenario, and there's others like it's yes, absolutely,
Right.
And not because they're looser. It's just it's a friendlier environment that gets it done. And even when you get into the city of Chicago, what people from outside the market don't understand is there are certain areas that are kind of no-brainers that you're going to have your isolated incidents.
Sure.
I get it. But even in the areas where it might be a little considered tougher, it's a block by block type of thing.
Think about Hyde Park, right? You have City of Chicago. I mean,
further.
University of Chicago.
You even go to the South Shore now.
Right.
I mean, with the Obama Library
my
and things
God,
like that are just moving their way down. And now, does it create challenges for people that have been there for a while? Absolutely. And and the city and the politicians, everybody will address that. But there's a huge opportunity that is being created there. But even within some of the western and southwestern neighborhoods,
Right.
We lend in those neighborhoods, and people will look at me, and you got to go visit it.
You gotta
because
see
you're going to hit a block that you're like, okay, this one is going to be a little more of a challenge. You come up to another block and you swore you got dropped off in Oak Park.
No. I'll never forget this, like Auburn Gresham, right? I mean, it has parts that are tough. You're by the highway. You're literally 10 o'clock in the morning. People are standing out in the middle. I mean, it's negative 30 outside. People are standing outside. I mean, a liquor shop. This is just the reality of the thing, right? But yet you go 2 blocks in, and you have these beautiful 4 flats, 6 flats. I mean, they're better than Berwyn.
Yes, I
right. They're
agree.
better than some of the properties in Oak Park. Stunning. And you stand there for 2 minutes. Some little old lady or a black guy is going to come out and say, "Hey, what are you doing here?" It's no different than being in Wheaton,
They know
where
their neighborhood.
guess what? The neighbors care.
Yep.
And every single doesn't matter. And a lot of times, politicians especially want to make it racial. Has nothing to do with race.
No, I
right?
agree.
People who care, doesn't matter the race. Guess what happens? Their blocks are the nicer blocks, right? I mean, it's just that simple. Why? Because the neighbors care.
Because it goes down back to character.
Character, 100%, right? And that's where the nuance, Evergreen Park is such a funny example, because literally you have railroad tracks runs right through the towns, right? You have a house which is a frame house, it's going to have no foundation. This is just a fact.
Right.
And people are like, how do you know that? I'm like, listen, we've done enough. And that's called understanding. You have a frame house next to the railroad tracks. And if you look at the historical context, people with brick houses, same size, they were considered at that time the rich people.
Right.
People who had frame houses, they would take the old railroad ties, throw it over. They would take the railroad ties, make that the foundation, and build a house on it, right? Today, Evergreen Park is going to make you basically tear that house down. There's no way, and they justified it under OSHA requirements. And you buy a house, which is a frame house, you thought, oh my God, I got it for 60, Andrew. You buy the house 2 doors down for 140. Guess what? That $60,000 house is going to be torn down. And that 120 house on the back end, fixed up, is worth 350.
Right.
And those nuances is where the money is made.
That's where knowledge is
Yeah.
rewarded. Exactly. And one of my town I grew up in, a little bit further out in the rim, but Joliet.
Yeah.
Is
My God.
one of those where, that whole Will County core, whether it's Joliet, Crest Hill, Lockport, Rockdale, all these towns we've had conversations about, it can happen. There's parts of it marvelous, fantastic.
Yeah.
There are other parts of it that fit right into the crosshairs.
I mean, like literally, you drive by the jail, you think you've basically gone back in time.
Right.
Right? I mean, it's the old big walls, and you're like, what the hell am I? Right? Go towards old part of the middle of downtown Joliet, right? You're like perfect middle-priced value housing, right? Your bread and butter housing. You go a little bit east, you suddenly start getting into nice properties. You go, and that's where money is made. There's so much opportunity because of that no, I'm going to avoid the crazy areas, but half a mile over is a fantastic area to buy.
Back to your original question, Chicago rewards knowledge.
Knowledge, right. Anything else, man, I may have missed that we didn't cover?
No, I appreciate your time as always. It's a pleasure to spend time with you.
No, this has been fun. This has been fun. So before we wrap up, I want to kind of go back. Like I've always said that, especially if you're starting out. I mean, if you came where your parents had a lot of money, it's a different issue. But I've been a proponent of start small and gradually build it. And you want to build it big, you want to go to multis, big storage things, that's fine. But start small and then start multiplying. That's a much more measured approach, according to me. But today, we've laughed about this often. Right? Today, people are like, oh, you go big or you go home, right? This is from a banker's perspective, what is because you get to see the other side of the balance sheets.
Right. So I'm going to go back to the word that I've used multiple times here. It comes down to character. In this case, it's operational character. There's no way that if you are we'll use one of our favorite people, you're an engineer at Caterpillar Tractor, and then all of a sudden you're going to take that skill set and it's going to transfer to managing 50 standalone properties.
Right.
You're taught that skill. There are certain things that will transfer,
Sure.
experience. You never forget to where you were, but remember where you are, type of thing. But you have to learn the process. And scaling quickly, you can be lucky,
Sure.
but luck isn't a business model.
Right.
Right. So I think that starting small, building, allowing yourself to experience the mistake, it's important to go through a foreclosure.
Right.
So people understand that I just can't bring in any tenants.
Sure.
Or it's always going to be downhill with the wind at my back. No. And so those experiences and becoming a strong operator, there's only one way to do that, and that's to actually do it.
Right.
And to be part of it.
Got it. Any comments you have on the multi-unit space? Because that, at least in the last 5 years, 6 years, I mean, it's obscene.
Well,
what has happened in that space? What do you see?
It's hot because the inventory on the standalone single-family residence
Right.
is so low.
Sure.
And because of the 08-09 crisis, especially here in the greater Chicago area, you don't see the huge developments going up
there's
anymore. So
yeah.
you might have some infills. We've
Sure.
had a great deal of success with some builders that have found parcels and built 8, 10 homes or built some townhomes and done extremely well right in the middle of the city.
Sure.
Even. So, but you don't have all of a sudden the 600 homes going up, and that type of deal. So there's an inventory issue, but people still need a place to stay. So obviously, multifamily becomes, if you can't find a single family, you're going to go to multifamily, and that starts to drive that it's frothy. It's very frothy.
It's very frothy, right?
Right
I
now.
mean, because my challenge over there is that there's no lack of capital, right, today, meaning more people want to be in that part of it. A lot of people are raising money that have no business raising money. And the race is to the bottom, which is, oh, you're going to buy it for 4 cap? Okay, I'll take it for 3.75.
Right.
Somebody else comes along for 3.5 cap. And I'm like, this is just there's too much exuberance on that side.
Well, there's some silly play in there too, because even with today's interest rates, you put your money in a bank, you might earn 5% for 6 months on a CD, where it is better invested, especially if you're in the real estate world. But then there's a lot of 1031, the deferred exchange money out there, and people will think, well, it's better than paying the taxes on it. So I'd rather overpay for the property than pay the taxes. Well, okay, but then what you might end up losing, where it gets a little bit challenging, and I don't want to get too technical here, but when we calculate a debt coverage ratio on a multifamily property and they've got 30 or 40% down, and it still doesn't meet the minimums, that you're like, okay, something is out of kilter here in this process. And that's when we talked about stepping back. I think you're going to start to see institutions just step back a little bit saying, hang on, if you got 40% down and we still can't get it to the appropriate debt coverage ratio, either you're going to have to significantly raise your rents, which we know there is a ceiling on that, or something else has got to give. And we know that real estate taxes aren't going to be reduced. And one of the things we didn't even bring up was insurance rates have gone up tremendously. So what's wrong with this model? That's when we step back and say, you know what, let the model figure it out. And once it settles, we'll step back in.
We'll step back in, right. No, I mean, that we have seen that a lot, where people are, and a lot of these people are going into short-term debt, right? And there's no hedge against it. They're not, they're not putting a backstop on it. No. And you go into short-term debt, and suddenly you find now you're doing capital calls. Now you're right. You're getting, and this is something that I'm adamant about, that you want to get to 5 or 10 million, stick with smaller stuff. Even if something goes wrong, there's a way to fix it, because your outlay. Okay, my property, instead of spending 80, I spent 100. Big deal, right? It's not going to make any difference, and I promise you, your cash flow is going to be stronger. 100%.
You and I've had this discussion on multiple occasions, but you really taught me a lesson one time where I said, well, it's a 12-unit building. It's got to be more efficient than having 12 standalone residents. Right. And then you took me to school. The other side of it that's going to hit the market, it's hitting the market now, is the conversion. Yeah. You've got conversion of office into residential, and you've even got conversion of big retail into residential. And so that's going to be a nuance that the multifamily market hasn't seen. Yeah. And I think that's going to, people that bought at the top are going to experience that. I'm not predicting a major pullback, but I'm saying you're not going to get that 10, 15, 20% increase that you thought you were going to get just on pure.
I mean, at the time, net and bottom line, you have to buy the numbers. Right. You're buying the numbers, right? I mean, this is something. It's a math problem. It's a math problem, right? And this is something from time to time. We've had people in Mastery, they own 30, 40 houses, right? And man, I moved to Dallas. I'm going to do multi. I'm like, why? Right? Why don't you? No, but Andrew, I can get 20% cash or cash. I'm like, okay. How many houses you own? Well, 30. How much capital do you have invested in them? Well, 0. How much do you make a month? Well, $15,000 a month.
So what's that
right?
return?
And I'm like, what's that return? Well, no, but that's different. I'm like, what do you mean that's different? Right? And this is where I'm like, if you're just saying, hey, listen, I want to go from here to Target, right? And I want a car, and I'm going to buy a Ferrari because that's what makes sense. No, you want to buy a Ferrari because you want to buy a Ferrari. Right. That argument is fine. But I want to buy a Ferrari to go to Target. I mean, come on. Who are we kidding? Right? And I think a lot of times what happens is people have a goal of cash flow, and somewhere along the way, they get this sexy idea, multifamily, or self-storage. And the numbers go out the window, and all they're chasing is that sexy object syndrome, right? And that's what I'm opposed to, is that if you have the sexy object syndrome and you can afford it, go right ahead. But don't do it because that's what's most profitable. I mean, to me, boring is always more profitable than sexy.
Yes, and I'm not a big fan of timing the market, whether it's the equities market or the real estate market, but there are some times when the market is screaming at you, stop for a second. Because the models you talked about, whether it's single family, a portfolio single family residence, a multifamily, or even storage facility.
Sure.
Very similar model,
Right.
but there are times when the market is screaming at you. And
Stop.
you just listen. If you're outside and the western sky gets very dark and you hear the sirens going off, don't set up the tent.
Yeah.
Don't take on Mother Nature. She will win.
Yeah.
We found that out recently. So, just it's okay. There'll be a time.
Yeah.
It just may not be right
now. Having said that, guys, this has been a fantastic discussion. This is Andrew with Cashflow for Life. Joe, thank you for being here. This has been wonderful.
Always my pleasure.
Thank you.